It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend getaway, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. Little did I know that this camping trip would turn into the most terrifying experience of my life, forever changing how I view the great outdoors. My name is Daniel, and I'm a 25-year-old software developer from Seattle. I've always been an outdoor enthusiast, but my demanding job often keeps me cooped up in an office for long hours. So when my friend Jake suggested we take a camping trip to the remote Cascade Mountains, I jumped at the opportunity. We set out early on a crisp Friday morning in late October. The fall colors were in full swing, painting the landscape in vibrant hues of red, orange, and gold. As we drove deeper into the wilderness, leaving civilization behind, I felt a sense of excitement and freedom wash over me. After a few hours of driving, we arrived at the trailhead. The parking lot was empty, which wasn't surprising given the time of year and the remoteness of the location. We shouldered our heavy backpacks, filled with supplies for the next 3 days, and set off into the dense forest. The hike was invigorating. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the earthy scent of decaying leaves and pine. We chatted and laughed as we made our way along the winding trail, our voices echoing in the quiet woods. As the day wore on, the forest grew denser, and the trail became less defined. By late afternoon, we reached a small clearing near a babbling stream, the perfect spot to set up camp. We quickly got to work setting up our tent and gathering firewood. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, we sat around the crackling campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The night was clear, and the stars shone brightly overhead. It was peaceful, serene, everything I had hoped for in this getaway. As we prepared to turn in for the night, Jake realized he had left his water bottle by the stream earlier. He grabbed his flashlight and headed off to retrieve it, assuring me he'd be back in a few minutes. I crawled into the tent, exhausted from the day's hike, and quickly drifted off to sleep. I'm not sure how long I slept before I was jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream. My heart raced as I sat up, disoriented in the pitch-black tent. "Jake?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, just an eerie silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. Fumbling for my flashlight, I unzipped the tent and stepped out into the cold night air. The campfire had died down to glowing embers, casting a faint, flickering light across the clearing. "Jake!" I called again, louder this time. My voice echoed through the trees, but there was still no response. Panic began to set in as I realized Jake should have been back long ago. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight, then set off in the direction of the stream. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the twisted shapes of trees and undergrowth. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle in the bushes made me jump. As I approached the stream, I called out for Jake once more. This time I heard something, a faint groan coming from somewhere to my left. I rushed toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. "Jake, is that you? Are you okay?" What I saw next will haunt me for the rest of my life. Jake was there, but he wasn't alone. He was on the ground, his body contorted at an unnatural angle, and standing over him was something. In the dim light of my flashlight, I couldn't make out details, but whatever it wasn't human. It was tall, much taller than any man, with long, spindly limbs and a body covered in what looked like matted fur. Its head snapped towards me, and I caught a glimpse of glowing eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. I stood frozen in terror, unable to move or even scream. The creature let out a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through my entire body. Then, in a movement almost too fast to follow, it scooped up Jake's limp form and bounded off into the darkness of the forest. The spell of fear that had held me in place suddenly broke, and I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me at every step. I could hear something crashing through the undergrowth behind me, getting closer with each passing second. I burst into our campsite, my lungs burning, and dove into the tent. With shaking hands, I zipped it closed and huddled in my sleeping bag, trying to muffle my ragged breathing. Outside, I could hear heavy footsteps circling the tent. Something sniffed at the fabric, and I bit down on my fist to keep from screaming. For hours, I lay there in absolute terror, listening to the creature prowl around the campsite. Sometimes it would move away, and I would think it was gone, only for it to return moments later. As the night wore on, other sounds joined the creature's movements, howls and screeches that sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, when I was sure my racing heart would burst from my chest, the first rays of dawn began to lighten the sky. The sounds outside gradually faded away, replaced by the normal sounds of the forest awakening. It wasn't until the sun was fully up that I dared to emerge from the tent. The campsite was a mess. Our supplies were scattered everywhere. Claw marks scored deep into the trees around the clearing. Of Jake, there was no sign. My hands shaking uncontrollably, I packed up what I could and started the long hike back to the car. Every sound, every movement in the forest sent a jolt of fear through me. I half ran, half stumbled down the trail, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that terrifying creature emerging from the trees. When I finally reached the car, I broke down. The events of the night came crashing down on me, and I sobbed uncontrollably. It took me several attempts to steady my hands enough to get the key in the ignition. I drove straight to the nearest ranger station and reported what had happened. They sent out search parties, but they never found Jake. They found our campsite, saw the destruction and the strange tracks, but they had no explanation for what could have caused it. The official report cited a bear attack, but I know what I saw. It was no bear. It's been 2 years since that horrifying night, and I still wake up in a cold sweat. The image of that creature burned into my mind. I've never gone camping again, and I can't even look at forests without feeling a surge of panic. Whatever is out there in those woods, it's something science can't explain, something that shouldn't exist in our world. To those who love the outdoors, who find peace in the wilderness, I urge you to be careful. There are things in this world that we don't understand, dangers lurking in the shadows that defy explanation. My experience has taught me that sometimes the greatest horrors are found not in our imagination, but in the dark, quiet places of the world where humans rarely tread. As for me, I'm left with the guilt of surviving when Jake didn't, and the constant fear that one day that creature might come looking for me to finish what it started in those remote, haunted woods.